Thanks, Will. And I go by Will. So the country, whoever said country, because I'm a recovering interventionalist, so people knew in the lab I was ABC, anything but country. Very great partner of mine took ABC and said, always been country. So you can do it any way you want to. So thanks a ton, Will, for having me here. It's a real treat for someone like me. Look, we follow what you're doing, try to emulate, try to catch up. So a little bit with that. The other thing is, if I happen to say I during this, anywhere along in this, you can challenge me, well, who actually really did that? So I can tell you that. So one of the things that I want to do today is walk through and tell a story that builds to something that we now have a chance, I think, to do something special. But there is a journey to that. And so I want to make sure that I do that. And it starts with basically being honest with who we are and who we want to be, alignment. And so you'll see alignment, enablement, and improvement. That's the story. And then what we're calling our hardwiring excellence, high reliability journey is hardwiring excellence. How do we sustain what we've gained, but then get better? And I'll show you OR Black Box as a catalyst for organizational change. So I don't have any disclosures, except for I'm a zealot around the OR Black Box, but I have no financial disclosures there. And also I'm a recovering interventional cardiologist. So you'll just have to remember that's the lens that I look at things. And so I'm fairly simplistic. Is it open or is it closed? And if it's closed, do you want me to open it? So, so at UT Southwestern, I really love our mission because our mission is actually about people. And I think for us to be able to get closer to that, right, to enable, people to achieve their full potential, it's all about people. So what are we strong at? Well, it's been built on the science. And even as a medical student, it was Brown and Goldstein. I went there when they received the Nobel Prize it was LDL receptors and led to, so it's steeped in the science. And the science side of things has led the Nature Index, I don't know how many years, and sometimes by twice. And what that means is that people want to patent what you've got. And out here in this area of the country, you should understand about patents. But so the science is massive, okay? But you don't get Nobel Prizes and things for being sort of following standards, right? You're breaking away from what you knew before and discovering. So very important to us, but how do we do both? We've been getting better at quality and service. That's the story on the health system side of things. And we've been recognized as an employer. But what I want to do, and through this, what I want to ground us in is there's a couple of things that are weaknesses for us that we must address. So like most academic medical centers, we're organized for hierarchy, not teamwork. And yet that's one of our values, right? Teamwork. The other thing is around psychological safety. So just to ground it in that. For over 15 years, and our president, who's been there for over 15 years, said that's the lowest scoring thing on our employee engagement survey. The ability to speak up without fear of retaliation or humiliation. For our faculty, only 45% of our faculty, less than half for those other English majors in the group, actually feel like they can speak up without fear of retaliation or humiliation, less than half. Grown-ups giving orders all day long. And it's worse for the learners. So we've looked at that in 2019. So that's the basis of kind of where we're at, who we are, and how are we going to get better from that. So let me just give you a little bit of our journey and really alignment through a performance excellence system. There's a national one. It's called Baldrige. And we certainly did a lot of projects that weren't sustained. And so we had to figure out how to align that to a strategy. How were we going to come together and form that strategy? And every step along the way, there is a temptation to go back to whatever that was. And even some of the conversations that I heard last night make me think, oh, what's the reason that didn't sustain? Why didn't we carry that on? Who's got that? And sometimes it's about aligning it to a strategy. So this is our performance excellence system at UT Southwestern. So Ashley Holroyd is my dyad. I've never had a more wonderful dyad in my life. Industrial engineer from Georgia Tech, a couple of decades at Duke, a national Baldrige examiner, right? A Lean Six Sigma black belt, has built the entire team, right? So she understands those things that it may be an idea that I have that would be a hallucination without being able to operationalize that somehow, right? And so what does the structure look like, and how do you get that done, and what's the process? So this is what we've built. Some of these things we're good at, some of the things we're not, but it started with actually a visit here in 2018. We came to the Lean conference, we were presenting, and we were granted a couple of days of unfettered access, and we stole the operational plan from your wall with permission. And we started build, what would this look like? How would we come together? How would we plan? What inputs would we have? So first thing was alignment, and we've gotten better at the alignment, okay? So everything else that you see along our performance excellence system is so critical each step along the way. So let me just walk through some of that. The one thing that I would say is that we don't do well at performance review. Think again about psychological safety. What's the forum? Who's accountable? How do we do that in a manner that's non-punitive? So alignment. For those that would, it's not important, that it will remind people of what's called Shingo. And so we have, I'll show, this is who we are. These are our behaviors. This is who we want to be. I'm not saying that we're always able to live that, but then we've built a system that had to engage people across the entire system and academic affairs so that people could trust. Okay, and people could understand. People would ask in the beginning, what does the health system even want to accomplish? So common purpose, trust, have to understand benchmarks. How are we doing compared to what? You know, and what are we going to use? And what's our true north? And then what are those goals? Make them realistic, and then communicate throughout the organization. In 2017, we didn't set targets because we were concerned if we didn't reach them, what would happen? Okay, so how are we going to be very transparent about this? This is our annual cycle. And again, we were inspired, but by what we saw here in 2018, I can't comment on how well that works or doesn't work and what's been kept on, but we were very inspired by what we were able to see and things that you have that we don't have. We don't have tiered huddles. We don't, I mean, all kinds of stuff that we saw. So this is what we did. And we came together for the first time as health system leadership to really plan what this was going to look like. This is our 5th cycle. And so this is what it results in. So this is our operational plan. You will see that in every single unit. Magnet came along and wondered, where's the nursing strategic plan? Right there. And so it became an exemplar, okay? But again, that was stolen from your walls. What's interesting is that we finally got to put people first last year. It used to not be that way. And the other thing is this year we're pulling out safety as a specific item. And there's a, you know, you can do this any kind of way. There's all kinds of issues with where you pick your targets. We had this discussion about Vizient last night. But again, this becomes a one-page communication tool. These are the goals. This is what we're after. Everyone can see it, okay, throughout the organization. We also needed to build a balanced scorecard because we did not have that available to us. Anyone with a utsouthwestern.edu email can see this. Everything. Finances. Because we heard a lot from people that there wasn't transparency around the finances. How are we doing? What's going on? So everyone can see it. Now, we set the goals and targets. There's definitions. You can slice it by departments. You can do it by different service lines. So, and the other thing is that this solved a big problem with us around transparency about how we're doing. Also as a single source of truth. That can be hard. You want to show something, where's the definition? It's curated. That's the definition. Okay, that's what you pull. So again, this is alignment that's required for us to get better. What about the cascade? So we're not nearly as good about getting ground up that we need so that it's not just top down. But how do we communicate what it is and how do we cascade those goals, you know, throughout the system, and then to understand and celebrate. A little bit on celebration. Hard to do. So we have an event once a year called the Celebration of Excellence. And I can remember when I was like, there's no way we're going to do that. But it's the second largest attended event each year for UT Southwestern, other than COVID, when the president said it's COVID and this is what we're going to do. In the beginning, I remember I was hopeful that there would be 30 posters, then there were 60, then there were 120, now 200. So people want to tell their story. And so it's really been a great, and I see when surveyors come by, people say, well, we won something at the Celebration of Excellence. You see faculty with the, I've got my wall of, famous places. And they say, hey, but we won that. I think there's a lot of pride that comes from that. So don't forget the celebration of that and the work plan. So the operational plan sets the direction. The work plan, that's the tactics that we can say, how are we doing? And then for leaders, where are the obstacles that we need to remove so that you can be successful? Performance review, just real briefly, that's something that this year we're reorganizing through service lines and all the way up to the board, what that looks like, cycle of review. And then obviously the improvement. We have a lot of horsepower around that, just as you do. So how do we leverage that? So let me talk a little bit about the results before I get into where we're going next. So one of the things that was very important to us is actually to have a health equity measure on the operational plan this past year. That was the first time we had that, okay? We look at a lot of things, but would we call it out? So it's on our operational plan. There it is, heart failure readmissions. We were below the median, pretty close to the bottom quartile. And we set a goal that I'd really stretch goal that we would be the top quartile. But here's the important part. We look at all kinds of things all the time. Is there a difference? Is there a disparity? So real differences in disparity in how our patients who are Black or African American and or Hispanic. And remember, the other thing I should say about this, one of the best at heart failure mortality, survival. Okay, so the people that did really great at this. And so it was safe for them to say, you know what, this is important to us. It's an argument, is it a quality measure? But there's certainly some people who shouldn't need to come back to the hospital for readmissions, and there's this difference. So we did, there's a multitude of things that went inpatient to outpatient. It was really a beautiful thing between the ambulatory and inpatient worlds that actually helped one another. We were getting good at preventing admissions for heart failure, diuretic things in the ED that could be given and then back to clinic, so some structural things. Also, Strong HF came out, and so a clinic that was rapid titration of the 4 goal guideline-directed medical therapies, not just about congestion. How do you, because as a cardiologist, we talk about how's your Lasix dose, how's your weight. It's about these medicines that really prevent, that help with decongestion long-term, rapidly up-titrate that. Don't do it just for people on heart failure service across the entire hospital and whatever's in the clinics, because everyone needs it, okay? So our white population of patients did improve, but look at these dramatic improvements for others. So we're closing gaps, because we built a program that actually is good for everyone without specifically saying, what we needed to do for certain populations. Now, the next level is to get to the health-related social needs to get even better. And really dramatic improvements for Hispanic. And then if your preferred language is English or Spanish, just as good as it gets for designing something that you can put across an entire system and challenging ourselves. That was the piece, challenging ourselves on the annual process and putting it out there. So one last slide on why we think we're good, and then I'll tell you why I think we're actually not that good. So that's going to be the meat of it. But for UT Southwestern, we're in an area of the country that's growing just massively, okay? And our growth is nothing short of meteoric. And so you can see no matter how you want to measure the growth, it's been massive. And the thing that makes me nervous all the time is, oh my gosh, how will we possibly sustain anything that we've gained as we go to new areas, we have new places and whatnot. And that's for another day. But there are things that we've done when we've opened up new places, take our best of our best and the way we hire, and whether it's guest and patient services. So when we've opened new places, they've had the best experience, as it turns out, as things come along. So And the other thing is we got better at mortality. We were in the bottom quartile. If you look back in 2016, we lowered the mortality rate by 40%, got better. This number one right here in the patient experience, that's because you guys, I think, were one here. And, and so we were trying to chase you, and we won't be able to sustain that this year. But at least we had the banner for a year. So anyway, and then U.S. News and World Report. I don't know if I see Paul anywhere, someone who has to explain. I got to explain this year why we were falling off the cliff, because we were on a roll last year. Of course, we're outside the top 250 before, and CMS 3 stars and now 5 stars. So people recognizing that we're getting better for the right reasons. We were 21st, but we actually had more honor roll points than before. We're getting better. We're not falling off the cliff. So remember, you don't go after the rankings for the rankings. Decide what's important to you. Go after that, and then let the rankings be where they may. And certain people will have to take it on the chin that the ranking's not as good. That's just part of the role. But safety is where we really suffer. So where we've gotten better and where we would be in the top couple of percent when you look at Medicare for mortality and the patient experience, we're actually in the bottom for safety. And I absolutely believe that that's because we don't have the ability to speak up, recognize the small things. We recognize the small things, but it's the inability to speak up, because that could be really bad for you if you speak up in that moment, okay? Maybe good for the patient, the organization, but it won't be good for you. So who do we want to be? Well, we said we want to be this, a high-performing culture. And I'll go into that a little bit. I added this, so these culture enablers: lead with humility, respect every individual. Long way to go, just for the foundation. So I'll pause here just a little bit. Dresner has a maturity model. And so as I think about it, I just begin to think, and you can think about, okay, as leadership, who are we, okay, at UT Southwestern? You can think about these things for where you might exist and what's possible. So we're much more a traditional culture. We've achieved a lot, but we're a much more traditional hierarchical culture. Our people actually are moving along faster than we are, and that's why we're getting the results that we're getting, okay? But there's a lot that you can look here and say, well, you know, where do we sit? And especially as change, you know, whatever you're going to do to change, where are you culturally and it requires all of these things, right? For these big sort of achieving something special and something that you haven't done before. So I think that if you just move along the leadership and think top-down hierarchical annual reviews, power from position, and I've heard that, hey, I got to have this position, otherwise I won't get anything done. I got to have the title. But really what you want to move towards is, you know, it's the team that actually is there. It's the power from the team. And that's a very different mindset and a different way to behave. This is another way to look at it. And the reason that I like this is it talks about alignment with mission. We've had some of these discussions. You know, chaos reigns, you know, maybe where you start. Certainly you guys aren't there, but I think in some degree we were there. But really departmental optimization, and that can be how you're structured. Brian, we were talking about, I mean, a chair for us at UT Southwestern has the university hospitals, separate from our county hospital, Parkland, separate from Children's, separate from the VA, separate from Southwestern Health Resources. So there could literally be 5 different strategic plans that people are expecting of a chair to be able to do. So if I were a chair, I'd do that too. Look, I'm gonna just put my head down and figure that piece out. So how do we engage and really talk about performance-directed culture? I have a son I've learned more from him, our second boy, and we were talking about a little bit walking in this morning, just the, you know, the drive is shipmate, self. So is it patient, staff, doctor? So that if the patients have the best possible experience that they can, given the situation, staff are engaged, feel rewarded. My life as a doctor could be pretty great, but you have to get there, okay, and make it so. Common trust in the data. We've finally gotten there. I mean, came up, high-level meeting. I don't believe, I said, yeah, that's what everyone said. You're gonna have to move through Kubler-Ross really fast all the stages of grief, because it's actually okay. And everyone's like, yeah, we've been through that. This is the real, number. But you got to get there. And transparency and accountability. But you need psychological safety to be able to say that I can be accountable to that. So anyway, a couple of things from Dresner about maturity models, and I think it really does play out in academic medical centers. So hardwiring excellence through is our high reliability journey. I will get to why I think we should even consider it, and are we poised to do it? So the president and I were having the discussion, and we've committed to this in an RFP actually in July 2 years ago. Daunting was the word. Daunting. Why is it daunting? And I love this. I just happened to find this after he said that to me. We were thinking about it. Changing an organization's culture is one of the most difficult leadership challenges, because culture comprises an interlocking set of goals, roles, processes, values, communication practices, attitudes, and assumption that fit together as mutually reinforcing system and combine to prevent any attempt to change it, right? And I can understand that, because if we get to some other spot that I would say, oh, that's great, that culture is great, I'm not going to want you to change it, okay? So just remember that there's a reason that you have what you have, and so you have to engage people in a way to change it. So why would we change? So the foundation really is around psychological safety for us, and accountability. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of what Amy Edmondson has described. If you ever have a chance to meet or hear what a national treasure, she was just elected into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So writes a letter that'll be next to somewhere, wherever Benjamin Franklin's is. So look, psychological safety is the belief, right? And the expectation would be that we can take interpersonal risks. You could ask a question in any forum, it'd be professional, and we would address it to the best of our ability. And you're making a decision in that moment, should I say anything? Like, what do you mean by psychological safety? I mean, I'm trying to figure out if I say anything right now, okay? Because it could be bad for me in this moment right now. It may be good in long term, but I'd have to wait. And then the other part is you've got to have accountability. This isn't about comfort, and there's absolutely no trade-off between the high standards, high performance standards that we have, and the psychological safety. So let's go. This is all Amy Edmondson's work. In the late 90s, she's a doctoral candidate, I guess you would say. And she's looking at hospitals that have the best mortality and the worst mortality. And she's looking at errors. And she thinks she's gotten the data transposed, because the hospitals with the best mortality have by far the most errors. So she just knew she got the data transposed. Not the case, because they were talking about it. They were open about it. And that's how they got better, right? Because they knew that's a problem, and they were getting better faster because they were open about it. So what about if you're on a team that's in the apathy zone? One of the riskiest teams, because this is where there's learned helplessness. There probably aren't that many teams in your organization, because then leaders don't last there. The comfort zone, certainly as a leader in early leadership, I just wanted people to, they like me, and it's going to be okay. Everything's, so you have comfort, but you certainly don't have the performance standards that are required. And what you realize is that's actually pretty boring. That's not exciting. You're not challenged, because the best teams want to beat their record every single day, right? So you don't have a challenge. For us at UT Southwestern, institutionally, we're definitely in the anxiety zone. Okay, so I told you about the near lack of psychological safety, but extremely high performance standards. We are proud of what we are accomplishing, okay? But there's a risk, and the risk is that it won't sustain because it burns people out. This is where you see the wellness issues. It's also, you have to address the toxic talented. And a lot of things can be said that is really goes under the guise of purpose. Okay, so you really have to address this singularly before you can get better. Okay, because you just won't achieve what we need to in the learning zone. Because as academic medical centers, this is the key, right? We always need to be learning. We are the innovators, and there are conditions that must exist for you to actually achieve that. Okay, and there's real science behind that. Obviously, Amy Edmondson was rediscovered by Google, and so when Google looked at, what made a high-performing team at Google, you required 5 things. But if you did not have psychological safety, you were not a high-performing team. And so that's when it kind of got rediscovered and a lot more interest in it. And I think that, so this is the challenge for us, and it's all about leadership and this way of behaving. This is the cultural transformation, but then we become a learning organization. So why in the heck we'll be up here telling you that UT Southwestern would like to try that? I just told you the state that we're in. So we took this little experiment, OR Black Box. So Northwell had it, and Herb Zay, the chair of surgery, and I were walking across the plaza area in 2018. He'd arrived there recently. I'd been there probably a year, but we were making some progress. And I thought, oh, this sounds like a great idea. We could see teams. We could see how teams perform. And so we decided that what we would do is put it up actually institutional, up under the office, not in the Department of Surgery. And let's see if we can create a small space of psychological safety, observe teams, and could that show us that we could take a bigger journey? So the punchline to that is we are going to take that bigger journey. I have no idea how successful we will be in taking those steps, but let me walk through a little bit of this. I just snipped this recently. So in just 21,000 cases, we've learned the tiniest bit from this. A high school football team in Texas, big Texas, watches a lot of film all the time. And we don't. So how can we get there? The reason that we can't just go to hyperspeed on this has everything to do with, will it be used punitively? So let me just walk through a couple of things. I think that we positioned this, and you have Theodore here. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of OR Black Box, and but there's always issues with anything that's innovative and how much you want from it. So what we said is this is all about teams and teams learning. We were very honest with who we were. There's, with the culture and where we were at, make it institutional. So it took us over 2.5 years to socialize it, go all the way up the chain. There were many meetings that Herb and I were tossed out of, that we're not going to do that. Come back, give us a better way to get that done. There was a pandemic going on, by the way. But we still marched on. And to the credit of the faculty and the staff, and I have to give Jaffer Oda a ton of credit, who is an anesthesiologist and really helped us with the socialization across. And remember, it was 5 robotic rooms. And then we had to promise we were never going to use it at web. So 2.5 years. And people have asked for it. The president's asked for the video. Can't have it. Chairs, I've answered this question so many times. Can't have it. But we could learn from that. Can't have it. It could be the ref. Can't have it. We have some other process for that. I'm not telling you that it's good, but we've never, ever used it punitively to this date in all those cases. Haven't allowed it. It is for learning. So in March, we were going to go live across 33 more ORs. We had 5 robotic ORs. We were going to go live across 33 more ORs and L&D. So I knew that it was a whole nother go live, and I was extremely concerned how that was going to go. I remember how the first one went leading up to it. And so credit to the people that went and spent time with the staff, 29 separate sort of large meetings, people asking. I remember the plastic surgeons asked me, why don't you put a camera in your office? A great idea, actually. But we don't meet much in the office anymore. But, you know, who's holding you accountable? Who's watching me? You're not going to, we're in the great Republic of Texas, by the way. And so I remember being tremendously concerned about it, but the socialization committee was so good at the communications and socializing it. When we went live, we had one person say no. One. It was a non-event. And so that's the thing. Oh, maybe we can take a larger jump to something institutionally. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on OR Black Box. I would assume that most people are somewhat familiar with it, but records everything all the time. Voices changed, faces blurred. And this is how we integrated it into our overall performance improvement structure. And yes, there's a chair and a VP that sit down here, you know, to help with this. All the way up, reporting through our structure. And this is, you know, this is how we did it. Legal affairs and compliance, research. I mean, there's just amazing research that can be done off this thing. It's like so ripe for that. Descriptive a lot of times. And so in legal affairs and compliance. So compliance, when we met with the highest level of the leadership, it was our compliance leader that actually won the day for us. Like, wouldn't you expect patients would want that? And what about the philanthropy that you talk about? So tremendous support. And we made the case that if we do it in these 5 OR robotic rooms, and we can see a difference in our culture, then we'll put it across the platform. It had nothing to do with operational efficiencies, zero. I'm not talking about cases, on-time starts, turnover, none of that. And so this is how we were organized, and the legal affairs was very important too. In the great Republic of Texas, decided that we were sending information overseas to Canada. I'm not sure what C that is, but overseas to Canada. And so we had to change every single consent in the organization, as it turns out, so we could do these 5, you know, robotic rooms. I mean, it was all these things that people had to, you know, sort of come along with us to get this done. So can't thank people, you know, enough for that. It has clearly strategic alignment, again, to our operational plan. The scheduling optimization hasn't happened yet, but maybe you guys will go with us and Theodore and help us out with that. Culture. So could we create a psychologically safe culture? I'll talk about that. And the leadership. It was really hard for Herb and I to model these behaviors and not be somewhere where people were talking about whatever it was, to let that happen, ask the good questions, get people engaged. And so not easy for us either to change who we are, because in my generation, and you know, interventional cardiologists aren't much below neurosurgeons and cardiothoracic surgeons. So this actually, I think, comes from Kaplan, and it was sort of defined as white coat and, you know, performance improvement. So these are the skill sets we're looking for. So before we were going to go live across the entire platform, we actually asked people, sent out the email, asking people to be a change leader. Be a change leader for your department division around OR Black Box Go Live. Reached out to 25 people. Within 24 hours, 23 had said, yep, I'll do that. And so I think that speaks to the socialization. And then those people, influencers within the divisions and departments, I think is why it's gone so well. Okay, so it really was looking for these characteristics in people, and the perseverance is is incredibly important. And I think that for us is, and what I mean about changing your own personal leadership style is, the buck stops here. I make the decision. I got it, versus, are we coaching? Are we understanding? Are we asking questions about what that means for people? And I think for us going through this process, hearing from people and acknowledging what we knew and what we didn't know, I think was a key to the success. So again, the initiative should be aligned to our strategic goals. You need a structure to support the flow, and then the transparency is prioritized. Focus is on team learning, and it's not punitive. So what can we learn? So from the very beginning, when we were going to go live, we said we wanted, at that time, what was called an enhanced M&M. I'm doing this because I've been at the M&Ms, right? I've personally experienced that. So we were going to show clips and open it up to whoever can come and have to talk about that. You're going to see things you don't want to see. So the first one we had 10 unintentional retained foreign objects in 6 months. So the first one we had was one of those. And you see the person trying to count and how many times they're interrupted. So to his credit, Herb Zay said, I had no idea. I just thought people couldn't count, weren't paying attention. Because all the root cause analysis that we did, basically were dude or dudette cannot count, right? Because if you could count, then we. So even though we were only in 5 robotic rooms, went through the structure of surgical services and peri-op services governance, that the person counting is not to be interrupted. Just don't do it. So people, Herb tells the story, came to his office crying. I've gone home 20 years, 15 years, not knowing if I have the count right, And so this was respect for individuals. And so we actually went over 3 years, had one in June. That's what, went long time from October of 2020 to June of 2024. So it literally changed things. We have 1,000 people show up when we have these. And so Herb went first in a couple of shows, it's going to be okay. And since then, it wasn't, no one knows. I don't know. I'm sure people who are in the areas might know. But we've had things where Herb said it was his Pittsburghese. He's pretty upset that asked apparently the anesthesiologist about, right, the NG tube, OG tube, is it out, blah, 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 but 20 minutes later, just right across it. And when he saw the film, he's like, I couldn't understand if I was asking, is it in or is it out? What was the, triple negative. We had early on, someone say, can you call me by my name instead of, hey, anesthesia? And then that actually led us to our training programs where people say, yeah, we don't want you to know our name until 3 years in. That means we're doing a good job. What? Teams have nicknames for one another. I'm not a Kansas City Chiefs fan, but I suppose that Mahomes wouldn't say, hey, tight end, if I throw the ball behind my back to you, you better catch it. They got nicknames for one another, okay? So we're building, on teams. And then we're getting better too. One we saw, and again, we don't use it for our root cause analysis. We should, but we're just not good enough to do that yet. There was a medication error. Hang a medicine that you thought would raise the blood pressure, lowers blood pressure, realize it really quickly. But the incredible part was the pockets were all broken, and it was, quote, muscle memory and not barcoding. One of the anesthesiologists said, yeah, we skip about everything we can think of to help guide you that would help us in the safety. So it's drawing out all of those things, and we see it, and everyone knows it. One of the ones was faculty surgeon left the room, resident leaves the room. You see the anesthesiologist. Hey, anyone know how to, undock this thing if the patient bucks, with stuff in the belt? Yeah. So we see the real things. And so chairs, so do we have a way? Do we have a policy procedure? You know, we don't know, right? So it's all of those things that we begin to see, and it's okay to ask and see it, okay? Because we've just created this small space. Again, small test of change. So we did a modified team steps survey. I'll try to speed up, but to see 1 or 2 points advance in this is actually a big change. We were seeing big changes within our peri-op spaces. Considering my input, you can just read through this. So I thought that it didn't matter. We wouldn't have to have the OR black box in every room. We had done the safety thing. And then rooms with black box follow the rules. Those that don't have it don't abide by any rules. So, okay, maybe it matters, that we can, again, are we watching as kind of big brother watching to hold you accountable? Are we watching though to learn, right? And address, does that matter to us? Are we okay with that? So where to next? OR Black Box is basically just our way of saying that we can take the next part of this journey. So as I think about this, think about if you have a workplace versus a high reliability organization. And here are the differences described by others. Workplace evolves. If you've got a high reliability organization, you design it, right? It's engineering. So you go from the traditional sort of hero model, right, to something that's designed, that's scientific. In a workplace, you have tasks versus processes, right? Trust the process and design. Related care versus really, truly coordinated care. Perceptions. I am the best interventional cardiologist there is. Trust me. Just ask me. When you measure it, maybe there are people and ways to get better. Habits versus standards, really tough, right? And then reactive, okay, versus learning. So that reactive is a culture. That's a culture. That's a real culture. And so is this. And they're very different, okay? So let me I'll finish here. So I believe that it is about the basic foundations of humility, respect, and that commitment to continuous learning as an organization and as leaders. And if you have it, lean in hard. I mean, really hard, because you can get there fast. You will get better faster than anyone else. But if you don't have it, then that's where you have to begin. The other thing is, it is really, really difficult, but people challenge me, challenge the leadership of whatever. What is it you're after? So we're not just doing something in a silo, okay? And then when you set those targets and goals, because then that's mutual accountability, we have to resource it, okay? If it's important to us, we will resource it and we will help you remove the obstacles and barriers. So let me stop there, but thank you. It's really a treat for someone like me to be here and spend some time with you. So Ashley, thanks a lot for inviting me. I think I left not as much time as I said I would for questions, but please, someone always has to go first.
So we'll start with questions from the group and then we'll go to Zoom. So I'm gonna hand the mic over.
Good luck, you guys.
Great talk, thank you. One of the ways you can measure a high reliability organization, Amy Edmondson talks about, is feedback. And one of the mechanisms, we call it the Children's Hospital iCares or SAFE reports, which, unlike a black box, are codified into the system. Could you comment on that? Because I hear a lot of the toxicity that's built into these SAFE reports or iCares, that people find them as punitive, and the institution argues to have as many of those as possible, but the receiving end, the foundation, if you would, finds them very disruptive, pulling the foundation apart like sand. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, and we had that too. We would send letters to people. Hey, great news. You had a blah. Where's this coming from? Who's talking to me? And so it's really not understanding and engaging with people and understanding that it's really the process that led to that. Okay. So let me give you a perfect example. We're having lots of CLABSIs in our medical intensive care unit, 20 a year, right? And we keep doing the same thing and sending them, the nasty gram report and how are you going to get better? So I said, you know what, let's just stop that. That really hasn't done it. That's not the right way for us to go. Let's just go talk to people there, right? So we go and talk instead of just, we're the experts in how you can do this. Tell me what it's life's like. You go into these, everything's out the door. There's, 25 things in there. How you possibly, and they're there forever. So once we just said, you know what, it's okay, but we want some ideas about where we could start. And God bless them. I mean, they themselves took it and said, here's a video of one hospital, here's a video of another hospital, and we want to be this one. Where can we start? And they created a buddy system. And as it turned out for them, it was the dressing dry, essentially. Let me put it that. We got, a whole list of things. They went like a year without a CLABSI. It was not helpful for us to say, hey, do you know how? Yeah, I know. And so I think you're right. Anything that comes off as, hey, you're not good, or if we're not there, asking them what it is that you need. So one of the things around the CAUTI thing, I remember asking, so what's the hardest thing about the bundle? And the nurse was like, come here. The dependent loop. I mean, you'd have to take that thing out into the hallway, right? It's not possible. The skin thing that we're having, 25% of the time, we have this for the skin bundle. You guys don't have this. We don't have it. So of course we're going to fall out of the bundle. So we're sending them, hey, you're no good at the bundle. They're like, you're no good at supplying us with what we need for the bundle. So I think you have to actually go there and see what people are up against. And then you have to solve those issues. One of the things that happened recently was we have the second largest fine from the DEA. 2 nurses had finished shifts, used fentanyl, died in the hospital. That'll get some attention. We've gotten really, really good. So we're doing the safety rounds, what we call people rounds. And the people are saying, well, these pill cutters cut and there's stuff all over. And then we have to throw so we're getting blamed for the pill cut, using the same pill cutter against policy. So pharmacy now just sends them half pills, right? That's what you need. So, I mean, I think you have to get there and see what people are up against, because we were saying you're not following the policy. And they're saying, well, it's not possible to follow the policy. And so my point is, how do you engage people? How would you want to be engaged? And a lot of times for faculty and physicians, I know as an interventionalist, for me personally, it was a lot of bleeding. So they said, you and Barry have the highest bleeding rates. I was like, Barry Rutherford did the world's first infarct angioplasty, the Jedi Master, trained me. That's great if I'm with Barry. No, not great, Will. You guys have the highest bleeding rates. Okay, I have the most complex patient. Okay. This time it turned out that was true because I love peripheral work, right? And they said, so they came up with a term and then actually got published in New England Journal of Medicine that was bleeding avoidance therapies. So buddies came to me and said, you have the highest rates. That causes transfusions. The fellows love to be with you. It's true. So access is an issue. But if you need to follow 2 out of these 3 things and it's going to get better, got better. They helped me. They came, help me. Don't just, you've got a cavity and walk away. Do I really want to help? Do I really care? People don't care what you know until they know you care. That's it. So I think that those things that come across as I don't care, people aren't going to respond to that.
Oh, question from the Zoom chat. A very common story anesthesiologists share here is that some of our circulating nurses aren't at the bedside to help with induction or intubation. Instead, they are counting and rightfully become upset if we interrupt and ask for their help during critical time in the patient's care. I presume these instances would be captured by Black Box. How would you use these scenarios in a non-punitive fashion to educate and change culture?
we had this a few months ago. Where's the circulator? On the film. And so we have the circulator people on the panel, and they said, actually, if we know the surgeon, we'll communicate with them. Know the surgeon, anesthesiologist, we communicate with them. If we don't, we just like, oh God, I'm trying to get the next thing. I'm trying to do my job. So it all has to do with the cohesiveness of the team. That's why I love this thing. Why do some teams do really well and other teams struggle, right? Even in times of uncertainty. So they were very honest about it. Look, if I'm familiar with you, I know you, of course, then people want to go back to the days like when I had my team in my lab and I knew them all. There was no change of anything. So I think that yes, the OR black box is helping us address this. And so then then it's respect for what someone else is trying to get done. So circulators need to know, are you coming up on some critical part of the procedure that you need me not to leave, okay? Or do you want me to continue to try to anticipate what you need and I'm going down the hallway? There's all kinds of reasons why we can get better at putting stuff closer and everything else. So OR Black Box brought out all of that. And so we are hard on that to help. Is that resource? Is that communication, closed loop communication, situational awareness. Situational awareness is one of the biggest, quote, resilience codes for a team to rescue from errors, right? That's situational awareness. So the circulator is unaware, potentially, of something, or maybe aware but has competing priorities and making a decision, I'm going to go do this instead of that. So the question's a great one, but yes, you definitely see that.
Another question is how to avoid compliance to an absurd end.
To absurd what? End. Okay. Again, from the great Republic of Texas. Remember the Alamo. You're not going to tell me to do that. And somehow there need to be standards, and we all need to agree to it. Okay. I think the issue is that if we have a standard, and that's the only way that we can, if we take out the variability, that's the only way we can understand, oh, you want to try something better. So my answer to the question would be, we need to hear that honestly when we're leaders there, okay? What do you mean by that? What absurd end? Okay, what? And then we need to be able then to describe why we do it the way we want to. If you want to try something different, how would we look at that and be able to actually tell if that's better or not? And then sometimes it's just not, that's just the way we do it. No, we don't feel like that would be a good trial or experiment to do for these following reasons. There are times when you don't do that, but you have to listen. So I would be incredibly interested in what the absurd end is. For me. I'll give you an example. We started our journey in sepsis because you have to, but 70% of our inpatient mortality is sepsis. And that's where we saw tremendous decreases in the mortality, but we were very slow. We weren't missing sepsis, we were just very slow. So the first leadership rounds that we did after we had a new process done by the emergency department, by the way, and I showed up, and so my partner, the chief nurse, because you could tell this wasn't going well. Do you know why we're here? Yeah, he says we're not good at the bundle. I'm like, I'm an interventional cardiologist. I don't even know what the bundle is, to be honest with you, but that's fine. So keep showing up, and then you say we're too slow. Fast forward a few months later, we were taking 11 hours. Now they're swirling the bag. You see this? It's frozen. It takes me 10 minutes. It wastes 10 minutes. So we went from not caring about 11 hours to caring about 10 minutes. So I would want to know what the absurd end is. And then you would be judging, do I really care what you think? And so I think that you do. You have to be able to listen to people, but that doesn't mean everyone's going to get their way.
We're at time. So one last question. So we talked a lot about psychological safety. And you also mentioned this concept. I forget the exact wording, but it was like talented troublemakers.
Oh, the toxic talented.
Toxic. Okay, yeah. It's toxic talented. So how do you think about addressing that in our organization, it seems like just a few of those toxic, talented can really undermine a culture of safety.
And I think that what you have to also understand is, the behavior that we accept is the behavior we're going to get. So I think we have to come together and agree on the professionalism standards of what matters, and then have a real method. And we're only just now embarking on something that I think would be real to hold people accountable for their behaviors. And I think the other thing is to understand that, look, wellness and burnout are real issues. For me, early in my career, a guy who I just loved dearly, he was on the floor and smashed a phone, he was so angry. We took him out of, he couldn't go to the hospital for 6 months, was the president of our group. There was a neurosurgeon that, this is my former life, not where I am now, threw an instrument in the operating room. My boss, the chief physician executive, went there, confirmed, yeah, that's what happened, and he was fired on the spot. Very popular, married to the most popular woman on campus that had built the Neuro Institute. She left, he left. It was a big to-do, but I think that you're supporting people, in the moment. The reason this is incredibly important is 30% of people now experience sexism, racism, bias in the workplace. That's real. And you have to support people in the moment. And so I am not saying that it's easy. Knowing the right thing to do a lot of times is easy. Doing the right thing really hard. And I'm not telling you that I'm good at it or that we're good at it. So that is the question and rightfully so, is brought up to top level leadership. What are we going to do about so-and-so that's whiz bang, whatever, and doesn't fit that? So, and that's okay, because then people can leave because they didn't sign up for that. When they came, they signed up for something else. And so if we're changing, then we're the ones that have changed. And you have to be okay that it's not going to be the right fit for everyone, but you have to address it.
Great. Well, we're at time. So thank you
Okay.
so much, Dr.
Thank y'all.
Daniel. And thanks everyone for coming.